folks. All right, hi everyone. Welcome to our fourth Tuesday of the night coalition meeting. My name is Tiff Guerra. I use they and them pronouns, and this is the coalition Fight Against Data-Driven Policing community meeting. Welcome. We're really glad that folks can be joining. And why don't we get started by, first of all, I just want to name, it looks like folks here are probably pretty familiar with the Stop LAPD Spying Coalition, but I just want to name that we do have additional meetings on other Tuesdays. So we'll just name some of those. On the first Tuesday of the month, we have the meeting of gender and sexuality and how people are surveilled along that lens. The second Tuesday of the month, we have the Fight Against the War on Youth. The third Tuesday is the General Coalition meeting. And then the fourth Tuesday is the Fight Against Data-Driven Policing. Folks are welcome to join us at any of those. And yeah, so we'll go ahead and we'll start by talking about outlining the agenda. But yeah, first of all, if folks have any comments or want to share anything with all of us, I think we can probably just raise our hands. We can drop it in the chat. Definitely want folks to feel like we can be very much conversational and participating in the space. And hopefully we can kind of be giving each other a nudge as well in case somebody says something in the chat or has a hand raised, and you know, before we keep going, make sure that that gets noticed. So yeah, I'll just see if there's any questions so far. Okay, so yeah, so today we are going to be talking about, we're going to be continuing our conversation about the architecture of LAPD surveillance. It's something that we're pretty much constantly talking about. It's something that folks are constantly under the weight of, feeling that surveillance. And so we're going to keep talking about some of those tactics, some of the technology and strategies that are used by LAPD. Last time, about a month ago, we were taking a look at license plate reader technology, the records management system, and some additional types of technology, including drones. Today, we're going to be continuing the conversation and looking at the way that people are surveilled on CSP sites. So that's community safety partnership sites specifically, talking about some of the surveillance that goes on there, and also linking that to taking a look at what are some of the documents that we've been getting about the way that people are policed on those sites. And then towards the end of the conversation, we're going to also be talking about 4118, about what is that ordinance, how it's used to displace people, to banish people from areas, and why are we talking about it this week. So I'll just pause. Welcome, C. I'm going to just take a drink of water and see if anyone has any questions so far. All right. Okay, folks. So I do have some slides to share. Let's see. Hope that I will be able to share my screen. Okay, I assume folks are seeing that okay. I guess I should go into slideshow mode. Okay. All right. Okay, so yeah, as I said, we're going to keep talking about LAPD's architecture of surveillance, and also just want to pause before we go any further. I mentioned like some of the technologies that we talked about last time. Some of the ones we'll be talking about today, which we're going to kind of have a focus on. CCTV camera technology is going to be one of the main ones that we talk about today. We're also going to talk about data collection at CSP sites through these forms where data is collected on communities. But is there any, also just thinking about for upcoming presentations and conversations, if there's any that folks are interested in us focusing on next? I would be really interested to hear about that. Okay, I'm really having trouble seeing folks, so Okay, bear with me a moment. I apologize, folks. I'm trying to. Okay, I'm having a little trouble with my screen. I apologize. All right. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll jump into surveillance, talking about surveillance at community safety partnership sites. And first, before we get into that, just want to kind of pause and make sure, like when we're talking about that, that we're all pretty clear on what that means. So the community safety partnership sites, do people feel like they have a pretty good grasp on what that is, or does anyone want to?
There's a question on the side here that came to me that what are community safety? What is CSP? So,
Okay. That's a great time to ask that question. So yeah, community safety partnerships. This is a program that was, and Hamid, I would love for you to also augment with information that you have about this as well. But this is essentially, it's like a so-called partnership that that HACLA, Housing Authority of LA, has with LAPD, by which HACLA actually gives money to LAPD since 2011 to place cops on housing developments, on specific housing developments. And it's nothing new that Black and brown communities, housing developments have been heavily surveilled and policed by LAPD. That was something that has always been going on, but kind of became more formalized around 2006. They started to be surveilled more, putting more surveillance into these housing developments, 2010 as well. And then in 2011 is when LAPD and HACLA actually entered into what they call a partnership called Community Safety Partnerships. And essentially it was this program that at that time was focused on 4 specific sites: Nickerson Garden, Jordan Downs, Ramona Gardens, and Imperial Courts. And essentially it was assigning 10 cops to these locations. And then also with the promise of like additional programming, additional services for residents. And all of this was done under the guise of, oh, we're going to put the cops there to be building relationships with folks on the site, to be building trust. These are places where there isn't a lot of trust of cops. And LAPD kind of flipped that to say, well, a way that we're going to combat that is to put more policing in. And we're going to, have people have more exposure to cops. So that's how it got started. It has expanded since that time. So in 2014, also Avalon Gardens and Gonzac Village, I'm not sure I'm pronouncing that right, were added as sites, as the 5th and 6th sites of community safety partnerships. 2016, another site was added. 2017, Harvard Park, and that was the first one that actually is just a park. It's not a housing development. South Park was added in 2019, and then in 2020, San Fernando Gardens were added. So today we have 10 different community safety partnership sites. And I think even Harvard Park calls itself kind of like a mission station or a mission base for LAPD. And that's essentially what they are, is these sites of policing. They're kind of also claiming to be offering services to the community, but really it's these additional sites of policing and surveillance under the guise of community policing. I'll just pause and see if folks have any questions about that, or if anyone also wants to add anything about that, or also folks may be familiar with some of these sites. Mamta, please. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to say, also they have them all over. I don't know if they have them all over the country, but certainly all over the state. I know they have a bunch in San Francisco. So maybe, or I don't know if we're going to talk about like kind of how this stuff is funded, and if they get a bunch of federal funding. Do they get CCOPS funding? Wasn't sure.
No, there's elements of that. I think before we get to the funding, Mamta, I think that's a good question that we need to maybe just take a step back and see what was the conversations that led to the development of community safety partnership, which really is very telling in how these programs are created and developed. So one of the key partners in community safety partnerships, besides HACLA and the Housing Authority of City of Los Angeles, and LAPD is the Mayor's Office of Gang Reduction and Youth Development. And the claim has always been, and this is where how profiling and how targeted policing happens as well, that this is again an extension of the continued war on drugs and the war on gangs. That the claim was, and this is during Antonio Vargas' mayor, and this was also building from what Bill Bratton had been pushing as well as a part of his policing, was about that how young people are being influenced, and particularly young Black or Black youth are being influenced into gang life, and how they are being recruited, and how they are being they're very much being done. And I can't exactly remember the sentence, the actual language that was used by Villaraigosa and Bill Bratton at the time. And this is where then when we look at it, when you look at the language of the original language, which is still very much present now, because now it's a full-on bureau, was about providing safe passages to youth. Right. So, and I don't want to go all over the place, but I also want us to keep on drawing those connections around the fight against the war on youth. That what does the language around radicalization look like? What does the intervention look like around extremism, and where policing of young Black and brown youth is going towards more national security type policing? So that was the essence of the development of these programs. In 2010, they kind of officially floated that, and then identified. So in a sense, it's nothing new per se, and how it has expanded, because it's also, we have to look at the timing, that this is when laser zones and the conversation in 2009 around Predpol and hotspots and laser zones and all of these things were developing as well. So in essence, all of that, whether it's a laser zone in various laser zones, predictive policing laser zones in South Central Los Angeles, whether it's anchor points to criminalize the Nipsey Hussle's area where he had set up shop, or whether they are CSP sites in housing projects, these are all sort of seen as the spaces themselves. And this is what we say at the coalition, that how ground beneath people's feet is being criminalized to constantly keep people in transition. So these are then presented as crime triggers. These are then presented in that language as narrative, that these are dangerous areas, right? So how do we save our kids? And that's where we talk about that this was a continuing expansion of what, under the guise of community policing, which is in actuality counterinsurgency, that how they went in, how Villaraigosa back in 2006, 2007 was reaching out to churches, some of the major nonprofits, how these partnerships. So I just wanted to add that monies then come in, where if we look at it, and this year's LAPD's budget is very telling, that how are they dealing with the youth? So on one hand, LAPD's overall budget is going to be about 3.26 or some odd $billion. But when monies are invested, Youth Development Office of the City of Los Angeles is getting $1.3 million. But the gang reduction, the GRIT program, Gang Reduction and Youth Development, GRYD, is getting $38 million. So now, in a sense, even that whole philosophy and investments in money is that we look at these youth, that these are potential gang members. And if we all remember going back to Jeff Branthingam's presentation on predictive policing, where he had gone to Lincoln Heights and gone to that park on the east side, and then taking photographs, where he sort of like on one page he had photographs of Afghani insurgents or whatever they call terrorists, and on the second page they had pictures of youth from Los Angeles and labeled them as potential gang members. So I think it should be seen as a part of an overall operation of how people, and young people particularly, are being constantly criminalized. Sorry, it took too much time, but I think just to kind of set this tone for people who are not familiar with these programs, that what is the background and where this is going. Hope that was helpful.
Yeah, thank you for that, Hamid. And I see a question in the chat here. I'm sure young Black and brown people don't like these programs and arrangements at all, but I'm curious, assuming we know how older Black and brown folks feel about them. Of course, I would not speak for Black and brown folks, but we do know that, like, you can look to surveys, and also anyone else, please chime in if you have a response on this. But I'm just thinking about like some of the surveys that we have seen from folks, some of the interviews we've seen from folks. Those are different ways that we do hear from folks about how they feel about it. Let's see.
Yeah, Tiff, I could speak on that.
Yeah, please go ahead, Matias.
And obviously, Black folk and definitely Black and brown folk aren't a monolith, but in my experiences, even in just presenting to neighborhood councils, you know, with the coalition in Black neighborhoods, when we talk about abolition, when we talk about, you know, community policing as counterinsurgency, younger folks, by and large, most folks get down with us, and we have noticed that. Well, at least I've noticed that the one or two people that appear sympathetic toward the police or will kind of play devil's advocate when you bring up racial violence by the LAPD are elderly Black people. So I think there is something to that. If I had to guess as to why, I mean, I think maybe on some level, you know, younger Black folk face this racial violence head on, and I think more frequently, and it's a reality, but there are obviously other factors in play. But I think that's an interesting insight. Go ahead, Hamid.
I think we can also go back to the survey that were done on CSP programs as well, and then one that we kind of lifted as well in the report, Automating Banishment, anywhere from how parents did not want their kids to go on a field trip with the LAPD. And then there was and this was also highlighted in a letter actually that was written by somebody who was not even a resident, but was there in Jordan Downs housing projects, working as a project manager for some more construction that was going on. And they noticed all of this thing. And then they basically, it was a pretty, we've actually, you know, just noted that in the report as well, that calling out that it's very clear that the parents don't trust the LAPD. It's very clear that because the LAPD was like, well, we're trying to help these kids, right? So, and then other people have also spoken about where now LAPD is going to be doing basketball coaching. So the community was saying that, look, we have enough people in our own community who can do basketball coaching. Why do we need a cop to come in and do so? So I think in a sense, that's also mixed as well. Now, if you want to talk to some nonprofits and some business leader and all of these people, you know, they're obviously they want to be in good books of the LAPD and in close proximity to power. So you may hear something differently, but at least what we have seen from actual parents and even, you know, visitors, like, you know, just how Richard Risher was murdered in Nickerson Garden in that as well, 18-year-old young person. So, and speaking to his mom as well. So I think, and then going back to, I remember speaking to YJC, Youth Justice Coalition Youth, when Community Safety Partnership was starting back in 2011, 2012, and some of these youth were living in Jordan Downs and some of the housing projects as well. And the stories were horrible. It was just like, you know, how they're constantly being harassed, how they are being constantly, I mean, to the point that there were strip searches going on. Right. And they were doing this in publicly in order to humiliate youth as well. And to also, because it's almost like they would say that they were drawing parallels that when the LAPD would drop you in your enemy gang territory. So this whole process of kind of humiliating you and publicly. So that's a great question, but at least in our experience through some of the surveys that have happened, you know, just and talking to people, it's not been, you know, very positive.
Yeah, thank you for that. Okay, so we'll keep going unless folks have any additional questions on community safety partnerships. We did think it was important, like before we kind of jump into like what are the ways that folks are surveilled and, you know, talking more about them, we wanted to kind of make sure that folks have that understanding of what are these places we're talking about, what is this program. Okay. So I'll just share my screen again. Okay, can folks see that okay? Yeah, okay, I don't have the green thing. I don't think I'm going to go into slideshow mode because it's just, and then I can't, it takes up my whole screen. All right, and I see your comment here, C, which I'm not sure if you want to say this out loud. Speaking of nonprofits being complicit, San Francisco's version of community safety policing program became a nonprofit itself from their own website. San Francisco Safe was created in 1976 as a project of San Francisco PD. In 1980, SF Safe became a nonprofit corporation and 40 years later continues to act as the crime prevention component of the police department. While a major portion of SF Safe's financial support originates from a grant contract with the SFPD, our organization also receives donations and grants to expand and enhance our crime prevention and public safety services. Wow, that's, yeah. That's terrible. I don't know if you want to say any more about that, C, but thank you for that example. Okay, so we'll keep moving with, oh, okay, no worries at all, and we're really glad to have you joining. Okay, so looking more at surveillance at community safety partnership sites. So, oh, we just did this one. What is CSP? What surveillance takes place? So the surveillance that takes place, there's a whole bunch, of course, and it's going to be the same types of surveillance that you're going to see just out in the community. CCTVs, that's going to be the one that we're going to really focus on today. But some of the additional types of tracking and surveillance that has always gone on or historically has gone on these sites and goes on today, tracking of license information as well, visual tracking of people through foot patrols, car patrols in the area, field interview cards. We can see from documents from CSP sites that sorry,
Tiff, you froze, yeah, so you may want to turn the camera off. That may be helpful.
All right, hang on a second. All right. Okay, I'm not sure where I got cut off, but I was talking about field interview cards. I'll just pick up there. So with the field interview cards, we know that folks in the area of community safety partnership sites would be targeted for stops by different types of patrols by LAPD. They would specifically be targeted to have their information collected, helicopters, social media surveillance of people in the area. And y'all froze again. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you, Tiff. Unless you're talking now, in which case we can't hear you.
Sorry, are you all still there? So can you hear me now? Okay. Okay, let's keep going. So these are some of the different types of surveillance. And then also we want to be thinking about what is that information sharing that's going on as well. So we know that community safety partnership sites, I'm not sure if they are all entirely within GRID zones. So GRID is a department of the mayor's office. Gang reduction and youth development is what they call it. And so, yeah, there is a lot of collaboration between LAPD and GRID, the folks that work at GRID, so much that like LAPD will actually refer kids to the GRID program where they do like undergo screening in some cases. So there's definitely like some information sharing going on there, as well as HACLA and LAUSD. So these are just some of the things that we want to be thinking about in terms of like when people have their information taken, what are those different systems that it's being shared with or different groups that it's being shared with. Okay, so just talking about when we're talking about CCTVs, let's see, and I see your question, Peter. How do they rationalize the designation of particular CSP sites, or is it basically arbitrary? That's an excellent question. And our nuisance abatements used for CSP sites as well. I don't know about the nuisance abatements, and I wonder if anyone here does have any information on that. As far as the rationalization of particular CSP sites, I am not sure how that is chosen. I know that the original 4 sites that were chosen in 2011 were sites where they had been looking at specifically policing them more heavily since at least 2006. And that kind of fits with the slide that we're looking at here in terms of that the CSP didn't start until 2011. But if you go back to 2006, that was actually when LAPD and HACLA were talking about putting more patrols, and also Connie Rice was a part of those conversations as well, putting more patrols into these housing developments and also putting more surveillance in. So I think they were kind of sites that had been targeted, and I'm not sure how that grew into this idea of community policing, community safety partnerships. I'm not sure if anyone else has any comment on that as well, or anything else to add.
The only thing I would add about nuisance abatement would be, Peter, that because these are up until now, these are public housing projects. So more than before they even gets to a nuisance abatement or anything of use of that tool, people are evicted immediately. So that is where, because of it's like city's property, if you will, it's public housing project. So they don't need nuisance abatements because it's not private property, or it's not an apartment complex, it's not a commercial site or things like that. So that hammer doesn't come down like that.
Just to piggyback on what Hamid said, I also know that like the nuisance abatement's part of the so some of the when someone gets hit with a CNAP, it's like they kind of either work willingly with landlords or kind of force landlords to either add or put security like fences and CCTV cameras. But as we know, like a lot of the housing projects are already designed through like crime prevention through environmental design, with fences, with only one entrance and exits, and already with cameras or like a tower when you enter those properties as well. And so just thinking about like how from the jump and from the like architecture of these buildings, how that's kind of been incorporated as far as like making it easier for police and into already criminalized folks.
Okay, thanks for that. Yeah, definitely keep asking those questions in the chat, folks. Welcome, Pancake. We're glad you can join us. Okay, so yeah, talking about the CCTVs. So it used to be originally that Motorola was the vendor or the company that provided that CCTV service since then. And yeah, and just noting that that also was paired with license plate reader technology. It was streamed directly to cop cars in the area so that they could swoop in. Since then, however, it has been, let's see. Okay, so since then, that vendor has transitioned over to be someone called CellPlan, and their service that it's all under is Y4Net. So this is who has been providing CCTV coverage for the city of LA. And I would love to hear again if folks are have more information on any of this, because this is kind of new to us as well, just like understanding kind of the scope of these CCTV systems. So if folks have information about this as well, we would love to hear more about it. But essentially, this has been the main provider for LAPD in covering CCTVs in the city of LA. And those systems can be all connected together as well. And yeah, I see your comment here. See, public housing projects have historically been a training ground for policing projects before CSP. It's a continuation of that. The projects were the earliest targets for CSP. Yeah, that makes complete sense. So yeah, so essentially going back to the cell plan. So They have installations in the city of LA in a bunch of different areas, West Valley, Topanga, Harvard Park, which is a CSP today, but they installed a set of cameras there in 2012 in Baldwin Village. That was actually a private donation to, I think, like I forget what shopping center that was. It was, I think it was the Walmart, Foothill area, and then also at all of the HACLA sites. So, and it's important to understand this because, as I said, these cameras can all connect together. And I'm not sure if we know that this is what is also at Echo Park Lake, but I wouldn't be surprised considering this is the provider at all of these other places. And that's just a picture from one of their plans, kind of, I don't know if folks can see that, but they essentially, the most popular place that they put these cameras is on a pole, usually at a traffic intersection. In terms of what the cameras look like themselves, they look kind of what you would think. They look like what you see here. So they can be either installed on the wall, on a rooftop, they can be installed on a pole. And in terms of on CSP sites, we have an idea of where they are mounted from looking at some of the reports that come from HACLA and LAPD talking about the where these cameras are mounted and like kind of what are the visions that they're picking up, what are the things that they're picking up. So we see that they are often on over playgrounds, they are often looking over parking areas, in alleyways, just kind of all over the place. In terms of what these systems do, so again, they can be, all of these systems can be linked together across the city. I think they can even be linked kind of in between cities as well. So it's of note, I think Long Beach Police Department is one of the largest users of these cell plan CCTV cameras. Pasadena has also started using them. And they have a system called like a Genentech Federation or something like that, where you can actually link all of these camera systems together so that you can kind of have one command station for all of them, which is something that LAPD actually did in 2015 for the Special Olympics. So it's something that I'm sure they are probably doing for large events as well, is kind of linking all of the CCTV cameras just across various cities. As far as the CSP sites, so they can be linked together. You can stream it to a mobile device, which is what we're looking at here, kind of the different views. They do record 24 hours a day. They're kind of, the whole thing originally was just to be passively picking up, so-called evidence for potential use later. They also pick up ALPR data. So they are also scanning plates and retaining that information. That information was originally kept by HACLA and now is being transferred to LAPD. So LAPD essentially keeps all that information, and was also very interested to see that they also do gunshot detection, which I'll pause and see if anybody knew that, because that kind of blew my mind a bit, because when we talk about gunshot detection, that is, we talk about ShotSpotter a lot, and the fact that LAPD has essentially kind of, stated recently, oh, we don't use ShotSpotter, at different times during Operation Laser in the last decade, that specifically was looking at tracking and reducing crime from guns, and that did use some kind of gunshot detection system that we thought was ShotSpotter. It's been kind of hard to nail down, like, what were they actually using? But now looking more at these cell plan systems, they do have microphones, and in two different, on their website today, they do name that gunshot location system is part of this package. And I see your question, Matios. I don't have a lot of information on that, because like a few basic Google searches on that, I couldn't, because if you do that with ShotSpotter, you can pretty quickly find information about like people saying how terrible it is. So I was kind of looking for that same type of information on this, and I could not find anything so far. But I think that that's something that we need to find out more about. but it would make sense because we know that, LAPD does often, as part of its crime reports, it does talk about shots fired, number of shots fired. It's one of the things that it tracks. And so it's always been a question as to like, what are they using to do that? And I see your comment here. This is Minority Report stuff. They shouldn't be allowed to retain ALPR records. But if they are, there should be a brief window after which they're required to destroy those. Yeah, I forget what their policy says, which of course is pretty bullshit anyway. I'm not sure if it's 3 years or 5 years, but we know that they have in the past kept that ALPR data for like over 5 years, definitely very much using it to track people's movements over time. Okay, we'll keep it moving. Okay, so, and then this is just I was thinking more like 6 weeks max. Yeah. And I think probably some of us at least would argue here that you just shouldn't even be taking that information. Looking at the Genentech live viewer. So this is essentially, it's kind of a bad picture. It's taken from a presentation. So it's not supposed to have this like brown blotches on it, but essentially this is what it looks like. This is what HACLA uses. This is what LAPD uses to kind of navigate all of those different cameras. So it's a system that looks like this, where they can kind of look at the different areas. They can pull up different videos. They can look at archive video. They can pan, tilt, zoom the camera. They can go live, different types of things. And I see you shared a link there, Mamta, on ShotSpotter. Do you want to share what that is, or?
Oh, this is just, I think we talked about previously at another meeting about all the issues with ShotSpotter and how that's, it's sort of promoted as this evidence-based technology, like all these technologies, but really has been, is used in not just to surveil, but is also just an unreliable in court trials, So this is a recent article about a lawsuit that was filed about where gunshot detection technology was used, just like this is ShotSpotter, but something like what LA is using, I guess, the GLS system that resulted in a false prosecution. So I was just sharing that.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I'm sure that's the case with any of this type of technology. Yeah, so really interested to learn more, but I'm sure that's the case with this as well, and how it also like primes a cop to arrive at a scene in a certain way as well. And what danger that puts folks in. Okay, and then I like this slide. So how are these cameras foiled? It's been kind of interesting to read, like a lot of the reports from HACLA sites, from CSP sites will talk, when they talk about the cameras, they talk about how some of them have been broken or smeared or blurred with paintball guns, and how when that happens, it's very costly to replace them. And so they do end up replacing them, like in 2018, 2019, all of the cameras were updated. But yet again, in 2020 and 2022, in their documents, we see complaints again of like how many cameras are broken and how they need to be replaced. So it's obviously an extremely effective thing that people are doing, is using paintball guns. And then also they are foiled by trees. Not only by trees getting in their way, but they don't like that the wireless signal, for the wireless signal to pass through quickly, they don't like trees getting in the way. So this is a quote from the Vice President of Marketing for CellPlan. He's just mentioning that it's better for the cameras to have open space. So yeah, these guys continue to not want trees in the area for folks in the name of being able to surveil people better.
Well, I think going back to Nina's point earlier, I think, what didn't we even look at, and of course, there's been several documentation now too, that going back to crime prevention through environmental design, that how it's basically clear cutting. It is just to, and it's on top of that, it's an intentional way to punish people as well, because especially in the summertime as heat rises, and here they are in name of safety and to have better opportunities for surveillance, where they're cutting down trees, they're rearranging, various things. And now it's not only for the visual eye of, and we saw that video from 77 Division, the LAPD, speaking about clearing out these areas as well. But then, just now we see these cell plan type cameras and the various other things, which are in addition to further tools of crime prevention through environmental design. So, again, it's the environmental disaster, the rising heat from asphalt. It's how many different levels, how people are being punished.
Yeah, agree. And we'll talk more about crime prevention through environmental design really soon as well. And then I see your comment here that claims that their tech, that the tech can detect or decipher gunshot sounds are far-fetched. Yes, absolutely. Essentially, they are microphones. There are microphones in the community picking up sounds and then sending cops to the area. Okay, and then so additional forms of surveillance again. So we mentioned some of these to begin with, but just naming a few more, or naming them again. So patrol helicopters, field interview cards, and then social media analysis and tracking. So this is something that, again, we know goes on regardless, but we also know that individuals may be, LAPD does specifically track individuals in areas that they deem to be, or they have labeled to be high crime, which does include CSP sites, which does include a number of locations in Black and Brown communities that have been targeted historically. And one of the folks, Ryan Joseph, is someone who was killed in Harvard Park, in the Harvard Park area. It was at 60th and Western in 2016. I think it was December 18th at 8:30 p.m. And essentially this is someone, 20-year-old Black man in the area who was murdered by Metro police. And later, when you look at the report from the DA's office, they mention how, I think it was 16 minutes prior to him being shot, he had posted a picture on his Twitter account of himself holding a gun, standing with another person, which to me makes me wonder, to what extent are they tracking people? We know that they track, we know that they are able to, we know they gather people's social media information in an area. They do track people that way. We know from their own forums that they do look at people's social media in the area of CSP sites. And we also know that they are able to do scans of zip codes of locations to see all of the social media posts that are coming out of that area. So, we don't know that that's particularly how they were tracking Ryan Joseph. It is absolutely possible. They also do mention as well footage that they got from a CCTV camera in the area after he had been killed. So again, this is very much, all of these forms of surveillance are very much ways that people are tracked. That does lead to them being found by LAPD, does lead to people being killed. And again, Richard Risher was another person who was killed on a CSP site in the Nickerson Gardens, again in 2016. And his death was also captured on CCTV camera. So it's a way of kind of locating folks, sending cops to an area, and also kind of tracking their death and providing evidence after the fact as well. And then additional forms of data collection would be the crime prevention through environmental design forms, which do provide us information on the sites, and also grid referrals, by which LAPD refers youth to grid where they're given a risk assessment form, which I think we're kind of in the process of learning more about. And I'm not sure if anyone has any information on that, but yeah, that's something that we would love to know more about as well. I'll just pause and see if there's any questions. We're going to next talk about the safety assessment forms. So I'll just see if any folks have any questions. Okay, so, and I think we do have a few people with us today. Taylor and Isaiah, I think we're going to be here. The safety assessment forms, these are essentially safety plans is what LAPD calls them, or they call them safety assessments that are done at each CSP site. And these are kind of posed as ways that LAPD is coming together with community to look at a site, talk about safety, address the issues, list out what they are, and create a plan saying, this is what we see as being an issue, and then kind of tracking like, okay, this is what we're identifying as an issue. These are things we want solved. And then applying this set of guidelines, which is called crime prevention through environmental design, which is essentially a way of kind of, they call it a set of guidelines to kind of reduce crime in an area, but it's really kind of a set of guidelines to, or a set of rules to control an area, to make sure that people are consistently surveilled, to make sure there are enclosures around an area. It's kind of different ways to restrict movement of an area, all under the guise of increasing safety, or putting these kind of these rigorous things in place to be increasing safety. So they do these assessments. They're supposed to do them every year. In our community policing group, we requested those plans. We wanted to see what they looked like. And we did get the plans from 2020. And then we also got the set from 2022. And in our community policing working group, that's something that we've been looking at. So some of the questions on here, that's what those are. So they are essentially, and I'm not sure if I explained that well and if folks understand what that is, but essentially it's just it's LAPD saying, okay, we're doing a walkthrough with community of the site, looking for what are these things we want to address, applying these rules of crime prevention through environmental design, and making a list of things to address that they're doing every year. It's supposed to be done that way. It's supposed to be done yearly. And then we'll take a look at kind of what is in some of these, but I'll just pause and see if folks have any questions about that. Or if anyone also wants to add anything about what is crime prevention through environmental design, any more about what that is. I see a hand up.
Hi, my name is Sun. I just had a quick question in regards to that. So in terms of environmental protection or environmental layouts, are they using it as a way of like specifically looking at terrain or behaviors that they pick up throughout that particular area?
And I'm sorry, can you repeat that question? I caught about half of it.
Oh, sorry. Can you hear me better?
Yeah, no, it was my fault.
No, you're fine. I was just asking in regards to the CPTED. Is it for those reports? Is it mostly just monitoring the movement of a particular terrain, or is it like tracking behaviors of the people that they see? If that makes sense.
Yeah, I think I'll take a crack at this and see if additional folks have comments as well. I mean, my understanding is that it is about looking at an area, and looking at, and actually, well, see if I can, I'll share one of these.
Peter's been looking into it, so I don't know if Peter is available to maybe talk about
Yeah,
some
sure.
of that.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I've been doing some research and writing about crime prevention through environmental design. So the acronym, they pronounce it like CEPTED. And basically this came out of kind of, I mean, throughout the 20th century, they were really trying to find design solutions in architecture to prevent crime as kind of this like humanitarian alternative to policing. And so for some time they were using like data about the environment to see like what aspects of urban environments and architecture correlated to criminality. And of course, they wanted to try to predict crime based on features in the environment. Over time, they kind of saw that that was really impossible to establish a very deterministic correlation between environments and crimes, because we know, of course, the environment is not going to determine in all circumstances when there's going to be a crime. So they started looking more towards community behavior, and really built into this idea of crime prevention through environmental design is creating environments where unwanted behavior or criminal behavior really stands out as really prominent. So this could be like raising curbs and things like this, so that whatever kind of behavior is not really wanted there appears as a more like objective aspect of the environment as opposed to some kind of subjective judgment. So there's also a huge emphasis on self-policing. They call it like natural surveillance. And this kind of rationality of trying to enhance self-policing has also kind of, for me, it's kind of folded into a lot of these other metrics that are used for other crime analysis systems. So they're really trying to measure like what is a community's disposition towards self-policing, towards calling the police on other people and things like this. So it involves elements of both changing the environment and also collecting data about behavior. But in these documents, they've always seemed kind of like a little bit like innocuous or not that intense, in a way that, I don't know, maybe Tiff can talk more about that, but these seem more about like refurbishing signage and things like that.
Yeah, that's yeah, they're definitely I don't think getting at the root of anything. These the way that LAPD does it, which isn't surprising. And I see your comment, Mamta. I think some of it is just cutting down trees in poor urban neighborhoods so the police have a clear view of the people in the street when they are doing surveillance, small time drug by bus, for example. That's exactly right. And kind of what you were saying, Peter, about how it's like with the LAPD, it's just very much, it's about, do we have clear lines of sight? Are we able to control an area? Like, for instance, does this area need to have it, like, is it too easy for people to get out the back of an area? Do we need to add a gate with a security guard and a lock and a camera? So it's like controlling space. And they list, you know, and they talk about it on each of these plans, these assessments. They all kind of look the same. And they each at the beginning talk about what is crime prevention through environmental design, through what they think it is. And kind of how they apply it. And yeah, they talk about signage because they think it's, again, with this thing, understanding of like, it's got to be very clear. What are the rules for this area? You know, we're going to post it. We're going to say, you can't trespass here. You can't do this. You can't, no loitering, no. So it's all about, again, it's just this very controlling way of looking at a space and making sure it can be surveilled, controlled, and then also just really seeming to be discouraging people from being there as well. Like just between the no loitering signs and then the way that if people are in public, they're going to be under a camera. Like they're going to have a camera over their picnic bench where they're, you know, where they're sitting. And then they're going to also have their picture taken. while they're sitting there. Welcome, Dogon.
Can I make a quick comment there, Tiff, on
Go
that?
ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think this is also to earlier point as well. I mean, and the history of crime prevention through environmental design in LA at least goes back a good 30 years. I think it was right around early to mid 90s that city council, and there was a task force, I believe, that was created, which was called Design Out Crime. And then, you know, it was further adopted, and a lot of emphasis was placed on, which is also very interesting, something that Peter was raising too and you had raised, was about self-patrol, that how communities, so in a sense, you know, just deputization of policing, as old as it is. So, you know, that how they can be designed for neighbors to self-patrol, basically snitching on people, you know, just the way fences around these developments, how, you know, even something as very basic as signs in storefront windows, and how planting of trees and all that was happening was also critical. But I think we also have to look at it that it's not only being done by the cops themselves. I mean, there's a whole process in this design out crime process, and like on the city level, that there are guidelines where city, like the housing development in the city, imposes those guidelines whenever they're looking for projects which are seeking city funding. The cops now also engage very actively with private developers. And I remember several years ago, I was working with, when the coalition's early years, Jackie Levitt. There was this incredible, researcher, and they were an academic at UCLA on urban planning and public policy. And Jackie and I kind of looked at the Nokia Center in downtown Los Angeles and some of the other developments that were happening as well, that how these are very well planned, in a sense, not only about design out crime, but also incorporating uprisings as well. So what would, in essence, kettling of people look like in case of uprisings and rallies and protests and things like that? So this whole notion is very expansive, which is and absolutely what you're sharing. It's not limited to, like a panopticon surveillance effect, but also very at the core of, especially in urban geography like Los Angeles, how this urban geography is being developed and what that looks like and what thinking goes behind in it.
Yeah, and I'll just, so essentially as I mentioned, we have a copy of all of the assessments that they did in 2022, or that they claim to do. So for each of the sites, and then we also have them from 2020, which is really good for being able to compare them. And that's been really interesting. And I'll just say, as I mentioned earlier, a few of us have been looking at this. Isaiah and Taylor, I think you are still with us. I don't know if you, I had definitely a few things I wanted to kind of call out, or I'm not sure if it would be helpful to look through one of these. Like I said, it's kind of this document is just kind of a long collection of all of them. Like if folks want to kind of look through one together, or Taylor or Isaiah, if you want to kind of comment on some specific things you found.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring up everything you've been saying. And then, I thought that was a good thing you noted when I was looking through the 2020 document, that there was that program that they were, some of the residents, I think it was in Avalon Gardens, they were trying to learn how to it was to build to learn how to build like a Wi-Fi modem or something like that. And that was something that they actually asked the city for money for, and the city completely ignores, like, no, you just guys going to get more cops and get more cameras and more lights so we could spy on you more. And I think one of the things I noticed is that, we noticed this is what, we're not going to ask the violence that the police themselves are committing against the people that are living here in Avalon Gardens or Nickerson Gardens or San Fernando Valley. But another point I wanted to bring out was that, yeah, like they even mention it, like specifically when you go through the Harvard Park documents, that, yeah, we want the cameras to immediately arrest anybody that's committing like some sort of crime. Like they just straight up say it. Like if you scroll right here, yeah, in the 2022, it says it right there. It's a
Yeah.
little bit.
Is it with the skate? I know that it says it for the skateboard park or.
Yeah, it's like right around there. You're in the right. It's a little bit more down.
Yeah, this one.
Skate park, these extra lighting, cameras, yeah, and a little bit more.
I think folks are probably getting a sense just from kind of us scrolling through these. Let's see.
Yeah, I was like right there where the bench is. Yeah, immediately arrest or educate lawbreakers.
Yeah, and I think something we just passed was about how we need to install like signage or cameras or something, yeah, to keep people safe and free from illegal activities. And I think like one kind of contradiction that came up going through these documents was at times they are really relying on weaponizing community fear and often tying it to, oh, the community is afraid of gangs, so we need more cameras. But other times, like I think in the Jordan Downs assessment, they say that residents have brought to our attention that there isn't parking, there aren't speed bumps, and they want things like stop signs. However, we feel more lighting, cameras, and continuing to address gang activity concerns should be the priority. So at times, like they, are weaponizing community fear or what they call community fear, and other times they just completely disregard it to like center installing more cameras and surveillance.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm just, so this is the Jordan Downs one. And I'm just looking at my notes as well, because there were quite a few things. And again, it's really interesting when you look at these and comparing, and also they're just note, like people can read that, right? Like when you actually hover over it, they did a really bad job with their redacting. So they talk about some of the things they talk about are like, they will talk about like, what are their so-called problem locations. They'll talk about lighting. Parking issues is something that comes up a lot, and it comes up in both the assessments, and it has come up in assessments since 2014 as well, that people need more parking and that they need parking permits, and that seems like something that should be solvable and apparently is not. So these are some of the pictures from Jordan Downs. And again, some of these seem like they should be extremely solvable by LAPD, by the city, but they come up, in both of the assessments. And let's see, it was at the end of this one that okay, yeah. So this one, and this is in two different assessments from two different sites. So the final page will say, since December of 2021, or well, the only changes from our previous assessment, which again is the 2020 site, 2020 assessment, has been the installation of new LED lighting. So again, they do these plans and they say, oh, these are all the things that we want updated, and that, the community is apparently telling us that we need to have done. But then, 2 years later, we're telling you that the only changes we've made are an updated lighting. Then they talk about, again, they say they report on some of the community members, talking about some of the locations that they deem to be problem locations. And then this paragraph comes up in two of the assessments, pretty much word for word. So as officer in charge of the Jordan Downs CSP team, I believe the issues mentioned above continue to be our biggest challenge. There are a few other issues residents have brought to our attention, such as lack of parking, no speed bumps, landscaping, and more stop signs. However, we feel that more lighting, cameras, and continuing to address gang activity concerns should be the priority to assist our team in our public safety efforts for this area. So, which is pretty amazing for an assessment that is supposed to be, you know, that is kind of pitched to us as being done, you know, together with community, for them to be looking at, you know, what are the things that we're working on together. And then essentially here at the very end, they're like saying, well, I think that we're not going to address these things. I think that adding more cameras, lighting, and continuing to address gang activity are more important. And again, that happens in two different forms. And the other thing I just wanted to bring up is, let's see, for the Ramona Gardens one, which is down on page 75. So this is Nickerson Gardens. Okay, so for both Ramona Gardens and Nickerson Gardens, they essentially have just the exact same information. Because when I was looking through these for the 2022, and I was like, oh, some of these look really familiar. That's because a lot of these are the exact same photos that they had from 2 years ago, and they just put them in again. So these are their safety assessments that have 2022 at the top of them. And it's the exact same photos from 2 years ago. And then in the Ramona Gardens one, I think they even have, okay, so the Ramona Gardens assessment, all of this text. So again, if we look, this one says January 27th, and I looked back to the 2020 form, and that was done in it was done in October 2020. However, so this one is saying that it was done since then. All of this information like this from Mr. Perez and CSP, all of this, the following items are recommendations. All of this is word for word, the exact same as from the 2020, and then follows with like about 10 different photos, the exact same from 2020. So again, I think it's like, I guess that's probably not that shocking that they're just doing a terrible job with this, but it is interesting to note that when these are surveys that are literally being cited by like the mayor of LA as like, oh, we're conducting these crime prevention through environmental design surveys at the sites, is like, you know, these are the signs of how successfully we're working together with community on these sites. So I'll just stop there. I don't know if folks have any thoughts on any of this. And I know we've been scrolling through these pretty quickly as well, and that's probably pretty annoying. So if folks also wanted to kind of get a view of these or get a chance to look at these as well, we would love to share them and hear from folks. And is it Sun? I see your hand. Go ahead.
Hello again. Thank you. I just had a question in regards to these reports. Are these reports used in order to like fix budgeting for them to implement more of these supposed changes that they have recommended? Is there, and I noticed that you mentioned that there is a 2022 and 2020. What happened to 2021?
That's a good question. I think their answer was that they didn't do it in 2021 because I think we asked for all of them. So I don't think they did them. And apparently for some of them, they didn't even do them in 2022 as well, because some of these are exactly the same. And as far as, I think you were asking, like, how are they used? I think so far it seems to be a guise as part of like, it seems to be like a prop, you know, part of their scam of like, this is what we're doing together. But yeah, I agree with you that there's probably more to it than that. And it's probably that they are also I mean, they are definitely also gathering information on places. They are kind of tracking, like we see how they'll, like some of them will say, these are the 4 problem areas on this site. This is where gang members hang out. We need more cameras here. So maybe it's this, you know, as data-driven policing is fed by data collection. Maybe this is, these forms seem to be a form of that. So like a form of gathering information and like, oh, look how we are tracking and gathering this information. That is why we're adding surveillance, because we've been observing, we've been assessing the area, we've been checking out the area over time. And this is something that the community wants. They want more cameras in the area. So I think all of it is kind of like laying the groundwork for that as well. I don't know if anyone else has a comment on that as well.
Just wanted to add that it gives LAPD perfect cover, because they could go into the community saying like, oh, we're going to be documenting, and I'm assuming, right, that they would say something along the lines of like, we're going to try to get the lights and like try to see what folks in community are asking for. But we know if it's not aligned with their surveillance agenda, it's not really something that they're going to happily do. Unless there's some PR string or some PR effort that is also attached to it, but it allows for LAPD under that, like they're trying to figure out what the needs are in that community, to like get access to the space, get access to the community members, and then the number of, just by inundating cops in that certain area, you're likely going to have folks catching cases, or being stopped because of that direct interaction between law enforcement and community.
Yeah, any other questions on this? And also Taylor, Isaiah, I'm not sure if you all had any other comments as well on what you looked at, which I'm really glad that you've been able to do that.
I think
comment?
Oh, do you want to go?
Just wanted to like to what Nee was saying, in terms of how they can kind of come into communities saying, oh, we're going to be like looking at these things that, you know, like community members are saying are contributing to like the lack of safety, and then just not follow through. In what I think the strategic safety plan, like a draft plan that I think they claimed that, you know, they would use the safety assessment to act on and make changes in the community. I also thought it was telling that they described safety in such limited terms and tied safety to criminality, basically. And they claim that in, I think I'm actually forgetting which community, but in the draft plan, they basically define safety or claim that residents are not feeling safe because of gang activity, speeding, traffic, and general disorder, and don't touch on like the number of other things related to like police presence, or other kinds of like structural violence, but basically only describe safety in a way that would kind of justify increased surveillance and police presence.
I just wanted to add that, yeah, that some of the people that have been living there have known that there are cameras, and like it does note in one of the things that they've been using like paintballs to like, you know, block out the cameras and everything. And another thing is that it's also like, it does mention like in Avalon Gardens that, yeah, that they try to use the cameras to like criminalize the homeless that are living like around there, and that, you know, that just kind of hang out there in the night.
Yeah, and I'll just add that like something that we definitely, like another thing that this really lifts is just like that consistently you see the requests from community being things kind of like some of the things that we mentioned already being things like, we need parking permits, like our cars are getting towed, we're getting tickets, like we need parking on these sites, we need for trash to be picked up, we need like certain things, certain basic things, we need help paying our rents, like we need better services, we need actual community programs that are being promised. And again, these are things that you hear and see in the assessments as well that have been done over the years, 2014, and in different years about community safety partnerships. saying, okay, what is it? What is community saying about these? So these are the things that they're asking for, but instead what we see from these is the police in the city not taking care of that on any level, but instead saying, okay, well, we're going to keep investing in cameras, which are very expensive and apparently not really doing anything. And yeah, investing in, I don't know what else, but well, paying the salary of cops is actually what the bulk of CSP funding goes to. I think it's something like 13% or so is to community programs, and the vast majority of it goes to paying the salary of cops. So that's something that is kind of documented in these as well. But I think that's kind of everything that we had to say about these right now, but we do want to invite folks to if you would like to take a look at these, we'd be happy to share them with you. We're also in our community policing work group. We're working on a few different things, including having conversations with folks at CSP sites and talking more with folks about like what we're learning and also just what are their experiences. So please do send us an email if you're interested in being a part of that work group or any of our work groups as well. But I think that's it. And on this section, if anyone had any further questions, which I can stop sharing my screen now. All right, so what we'll do is we'll now transition over to the last part of the meeting where we are going to be talking about 4118. So this is, and General Dogon, we're so glad that you've been able to join us for this conversation. I'm going to pass it over to Hamid to talk more about, just to kind of introduce us to this section and essentially 4118. I'm not sure if folks are familiar with this, but this is an ordinance that has been operating in the city of LA for the last year, but it was used previous to that as well. It is one of the ordinances that is used to banish and to criminalize poor people, unhoused folks in the city. One of the ways that people are displaced from areas, banished from areas, and it's actually going to be in front of City Council tomorrow. They're going to be talking about the further expansion of this ordinance, and folks are asking instead that we show up to City Council, that we provide comment at City Council demanding that it be repealed instead. So Hamid, did you want to talk any more about this ordinance?
Sure, thank you, and really appreciate all the good conversation, because I think it kind of just helps us move into this about tomorrow's fight, and Dogon will talk more about it, about 4118 and expansion of that. And just to keep it very brief, a little background of 4118, and which when we say 4118, it's actually LA Municipal Code 41.18. You know, how these codes have been created and how they've been established. And the history of this code is very much tied to how the city has managed population control. I mean, just no other way to say that. Population control and social control of the most marginalized communities in Los Angeles, particularly the poorest in Los Angeles, who happens to be predominantly Black and brown. But the history of that goes back in the earlier part of 20th century, in the 1940s. And if people want more details, please go to our report, Automating Banishment, the surveillance and policing of looted land, and particularly Section 4. And I also want to honor our comrade Jamie Garcia for her research and the work that they had done in looking into it. So a background to that was that 4118.18 LA Municipal Code was instituted in, I believe, 1966 or 1967, right around that time. And it was a continued extension of how we are talking about homelessness and the failure of the city and the complete utter failure of the city to manage and get people into housing, where Skid Row, what we know of right now, was a destination for some of the poorest folks. And, you know, I mean, this was in the aftermath of when the Bunker Hill redevelopment plan was instituted in the 50s, and the Community Redevelopment Agency was created as well. And that's when they started going after, you know, just these single residency occupancy places, which were like hotels, because this was back when, you know, labor was there, people were, and the train station was there. So this was, again, management of those people. And what was interesting was that, and there's this little piece of history that in 1965, the Bunker Hill redevelopment project decided that about 6,000 people needed to be relocated, and payments were made, about 2,400 or so payments were made in the amount of $24 each to a person to move from these areas, right? And then, you know, the city council moved in and they wanted to clean up Skid Row with these new laws. So that's when they instituted the Municipal Code 41.18, which basically states, and please, I mean, I may miss a little definition I'm not directly quoting, but it comes down to that nobody can sit or lie down or sleep on any street or a sidewalk or any other public way. So in essence, your basic existence was criminalized, that you can't sit down, you can't sleep, and you can't, you know, lie down or anything at all on the sidewalk, right? And so in addition to that, I think also in conjunction to it, where police was coming down very heavy on things like public intoxication. And so public inebriation became a major issue as well. So I think it's really critical for us to know that how these municipal codes have been used to criminalize, but then again, you know, people fight back. And I think this has been one of LA Can's history and major fight right after getting, especially the business improvement district cops, these private cops and private public cops, to be disarmed in the early 2000s. That's when, you know, just the people, and that's, Dogan will talk more about what Community Watch does and how we gather evidence and all of that. So there was a federal injunction, there was a federal lawsuits that were filed in which there was a carve out, which then allowed just in Skid Row, not the whole city, where people can put up tents between 9 p.m. and 6 a.m. So, I mean, I just had to rush through this thing. I'll again say that please go to section 4 if you want to learn more about it, about automating. So then, you know, the subsections were 4118D, which was extremely cruel. I mean, it's basic cruelty towards people. I don't know what else we can talk about. Basic racism and basic cruelty of the system to completely banish people from the face of the earth, right? And there's a whole practice in which was used in immigration laws quite a bit. It's called attrition through enforcement, that you basically throw the book at people and make their lives so miserable that in immigration it was used where people will self-deport themselves. This became a part and parcel of what informed the Arizona SB, what was that, 20, I can't remember the exact, 1020 or something like that, which was instituted as a law. So now people have been fighting back. People fought back to reduce the impact. In 41, along with 4118 came 56.11 that has been used, where people were forced that if they had any possessions which could fit which couldn't fit in a 30-gallon trash bag, the city would confiscate those. Right. So in a sense, how people's life is being made miserable. And now they're expanding 4118 into various other zones. And that's where the fight is. And tomorrow is a call to action to that. And I'm going to pass on to my brother, Dogan, to speak more about it. Dogan has been an incredible human rights defender and an organizer in Skid Row at Los Angeles Community Action Network, and also on the coordinating team of Stop LAPD Spying Coalition. So on to you, brother. Dogan, you there?
Yes.
Thank you. You want to talk more about tomorrow's action in 4118? What's going on?
Yeah. Fucking shit. Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Hey, revolutionary greetings. Yeah, it's definitely I will talk more about it. And so thank you for that intro, Ahmed. Yeah, just like you say, this is one of the ordinances that historically the city has been using probably since day one to criminalize poor and oppressed people in the city, all the way back to the hobos, right? Arresting them, vagrants, right? Creating a county jail just to house poor people in, not because of the city's it's overrun with crime, but the county jail was created to house homeless people. A lot of people don't know that. And then also the city's first chain gang was also created to house homeless people. And it was all about started from who can be in public space and who can't be in public space. And 4118D is that municipal code that the city just can't let go, right? The city in the last 20 years have been found guilty 7 times in federal court, right? Like 2 or 3 just around 4118D. 4118D has been found unconstitutional in federal court, but yet the city continue to play with it. They continue to twist it, turn it, you know what I'm saying? Try to do this with it. Why? Because it's the city ordinance that determine who can be in public space and who can't. Remember the ordinance say no sitting, sleeping, or lying on public sidewalk, right? And so that's what it's all about. That's what the businesses complaint is all about. That's what the NIMBYs complaint is all about, right? That's what police complaint is all about. Who can be in public space and who can't, right? And the city has been using this ordinance to push that. So tomorrow, once again, they will be voting on 4118 to create a new chapter of 4118D that criminalize people that sleeps around schools, parks, daycares, and shelters, shelters and rehab programs and stuff like that. And so tomorrow, citywide, the people will be turning out, right, from all over, and we're gonna be speaking about it, get this out about this. We'll be rallying up at City Hall around 8:30. We're gonna be going on. We plan on going in, making public comment, and then shut the damn thing down. Then afterwards, we plan on taking the streets and going in the streets and doing whatever. And so we asking folks to come and join us because today they just talking about homeless people, right? But tomorrow they're gonna be talking about us. You could believe that. So all these laws, all these municipal codes and everything, all this surveillance, all this stuff, they directing all this stuff at homeless people because they know right now, don't too many people like homeless people. We the only one that speak on their behalf. Everybody else hate them. So they use the homeless people as just the backbone to create all this shit with. But remember, as soon as they get all this stuff lined up, passed up, the focus is on homeless people. But you can believe they coming for us next, right? It's all about us. It's about controlling people, poor and oppressed. So if we let them pass all this shit and do all this shit for homeless people, guess what? We next. And so that's why we asking people to turn out, speak out, right? Because we got to defeat this thing. So that's what it is right there, man. And asking folks to bring your noise makers, whatever. If you're vaccinated, then you can get in. We're asking people to come in and join us. But if you're not, you can. We have an outside content where people are gonna be rallying up outside. So once again, 8:30, City Hall.
Thank you, Dogon. And a couple of things, Dogon. I think I'm glad you mentioned that it's coming for us. And I think a lot of times people don't think about it because it's happening there to them. And I think that's typically what we look at. But let's even pause for a second with what we were talking about just now, previously as the architecture of surveillance. Well, where does that come from, right? Now we're all concerned about it. Well, body cameras, I mean, even going back more recently, the Skid Row is a laboratory for policing. Body cameras were first tested in Skid Row. The license plate readers were first tested in Skid Row. CCTVs were first tested in Skid Row. Facial recognition was first tested in Skid Row. Broken windows policing was instituted in Skid Row, right? So in a sense that, you know, that why this is, and it's not just that we need to protect ourselves, it is an assault on all of us. And this is where these experimentation take place, which then comes back and becomes a part and parcel and normalized under the guise of public safety, and then then it's used on everybody else. Dogon, just real quickly, you mentioned something that there's been several court actions that have come down. Can you give a couple of things that how, in a very sneaky way, they come back and they turn around and then they try another legislative proposal to expand that? So now this is going to prohibit, because tomorrow, apparently, my understanding is that one of the council members is going to show a map. And I don't know, Matthias, if we have access to that map that he had put out, would you mind showing it? And when we look at the map, that how these things are measured, that it has to be 10 feet away from a particular entrance, 500 feet away from a particular school. And then when you look at these things, this is where, oops, I'm just going to open that real quickly. Let me just see. Okay. All right, let me just open this up and show this map to folks as well. That this is where now, when you start looking at people's lives, these are the large blotches of things that are being used, so nobody can be in these zones, not at all. So now they're slowly expanding and talking about just about that, how many feet away you should be from here, how many 1,000 feet away from any facility providing shelters, safe sleeping, 500 feet away from other locations like schools and parks and everything else, and on and on and on. So I think it's so I don't know, Dogon, if you have any thoughts about how this is being enforced. You still there, Dogon? Okay, we may have lost him. But yeah, if folks can come out, we're all going to be there. If folks can come out for support, I think that would be very much appreciated, because it's a war. This is part of the war that is being waged on Black and brown and migrant and poor folks, forever. And this is how these codes are created to weaponize to and lastly, I would just say is that whenever we talk about surveillance, one of the things we constantly remind ourselves, and not only emphasize, but remind ourselves that typically the conversation is very limited around invasion of privacy, and which really takes away the harm that is caused because it individualizes this thing. It is way more than invasion of privacy. It's about the intent to cause harm. And when we look at all these programs, they are very, very methodically created to harm certain populations and cause extreme, harm, relocation, dislocation, banishment, and death for many communities as well. Thank you, Tim.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, Hamid. Thank you, Dogon, for joining us and talking more about that. And folks, hope that folks are able to show up tomorrow, or also just take a look at some of that information as well that is available about this. This is an ongoing fight. And it is something that the city is going to keep trying to, in all these different ways, to be banishing folks from areas, focusing on folks that aren't housed, focusing on poor folks. And yeah, so we are very much asking for folks to be engaging with us in that fight as well. But yeah, that was everything that we had on the agenda for this evening. So thanks so much for joining us and hanging in there with us. If anyone is interested in getting more information, in checking into one of our working groups, we do have a number of them going on. We're glad to meet with folks, to talk with folks. So definitely send us an email and or send us a message on social media. And I think that's it. Were there any other community announcements or anything that folks would like to mention or ask about?
Yeah, I have a quick announcement. for our next meeting, and Tiff mentioned a little bit in the beginning of the meeting that our next Tuesday is our gender and sexuality working group or webinar. So we will be specifically organizing and talking about some of our research right now with the targeting of sex work, especially or in the Super Bowl, as well as doing some hopefully putting together some self-defense kits for femmes locally in the area. So stay tuned for that. We're going to be announcing it shortly, but that's something that's next Tuesday at 6 p.m. to 8 p.m.
Right on. All right. Anything else, folks? All right. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a great evening.
Thank you all.
Later, y'all. And sorry, Hamid. Have a good night.